Welcome, everyone, to the show. So glad you're here. My name is Rev Trev, and I'm pumped about today's episodes that are coming out this week. We want to help you with good fantasy advice so that you can compete in your league. You can be a contender, because it's very difficult to win a championship. And we want to help you win a championship. And so, speaking of championships, I want to bring in a superstar champion, Stuart Dixon, to the show to help us today with awesome fantasy advice. Welcome, Stuart, to the show. So glad to have you.
Well, thanks so much, Trevor. And just want to say I am thrilled that you're doing this. I think it's great. It's awesome to see individual content about a subject that many guys are passionate about. And as the two-time IFFL champion, we are only going to hand up advice where you can actually get rigged. So you want to turn your volume up for this one, boys.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So one of the things that I find that's difficult, and our video is regarding handcuffs. And the reason why we want to bring this up is because I believe that people focus way too much on that first round pick, the second round pick, all the way to the fourth round. Maybe they go, if you go into mock drafts, people stay till about 6 rounds and then they leave. Well, that's not helpful. What's helpful is when you, and this is where you win championships and become contenders, is that winning the late rounds. And there's this thing called handcuffs. And we want to talk about handcuffs today for the running back position. My question to you, Stu, is do you need to handcuff your studs?
Well, there's two schools of thoughts on this. And I think it's a great debate in terms of what fantasy managers view and employ as their strategies in those later rounds. We know the running back position is a highly coveted position. There's a dime a dozen in terms of the studs. And then there's a bunch of backfield committees and guys that are just not talented or they're not utilized at all in their offensive systems. If you ask me, I mean, I personally have employed a lot of handcuffs in my experience as a fantasy football manager. Some of them have won me championships or playoff games. And realistically, it's on a case-by-case basis. Every team has a different method of system. And to be honest, if you're really new to the fantasy football world, a handcuff essentially means as a second string running back or second string position player behind the starter that could break out, become talented if there was an injury to the starter or if the starter got benched in some cases. In the running back world of things, which is our primary focus on today's episode, it's really on a case-by-case basis. And I personally feel like there are some handcuffs, depending on your formats, that have standalone value and could absolutely erupt into huge fantasy value in those December, January months of playing football that could win you, a championship. So I think we're going to go through some of them, but in short, I think there's a lot of value in them.
Absolutely. And so thank you for defining that, because I didn't define that. And I know that there's people who are watching our videos that are literally first time fantasy people. And then we have all the way up to people who've been playing this for decades and watching as well. So we just welcome everyone here. For example, in regards to handcuff, there's injuries that happen all the time. This is a very violent sport. And so for last year, for example, everyone was drafting McCaffrey #1, which they should have. He is dynamic, elite, the best running back out there last year, and he went down with a massive injury. And I was fortunate enough to pick up Mike Davis, and I'm telling you, actually, it was in our league, Stu, that we were in together. And because of that pickup, it made me stay competitive, and I end up coming third place out of all those teams. And so I'm really excited about today's topic. And so we're going to dive into 5 handcuffs that we're going to talk about. Is it worth it just to pick that player or both of those players? Do you just want the elite running back, or do you want the handcuff, or do you want both? So we're going to dive into 5 different ones. So we're going to do Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, Chubb and Hunt in Cleveland. We're going to be going to Jacksonville to talk about that situation. We're going to be talking about Baltimore situation, and of course the Dallas Cowboys. So let's dive into this. Let's start off with my favorite team, the Green Bay Packers. Lots of controversy this summer. No one's talking about the running backs. So let's talk about Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. Is it worth it to have A.J. Dillon as a backup and if you have Aaron Jones on your team?
I think without question, 100%. And I'm not saying this just because of Jamal Williams' departure. There's about 150 or so touches that are being vacated from his departure. But I'm actually saying this from the perspective that I think A.J. Dillon is a terrific second-year player going into a second season. Let's not forget this. The Packers made a second-round pick investment into this guy in the draft with Jordan Love. And he was a dynamic back at Boston College, very unique back in his draft class. He was one of the only backs over 220 pounds. He's 245 pounds at his pro day, so he's a very heavy set guy. But the Packers also demonstrated late in the season when he was healthy, because of course he had COVID, that he could be a dynamic ball carrier. And certainly the offseason pictures of his quadriceps certainly validate that.
Yeah.
The Packers have also, publicly said that they would like to rush A.J. Dillon more in between the tackles and in goal line situations. If you ask me, now this is an extremely a hot take in terms of my perception of this backfield tandem, but I can see a scenario where A.J. Dillon actually outplays Aaron Jones outright.
Wow.
And I know that's a really, exasperated take to say, but, the Packers signed Aaron Jones to a contract, but made, the back half of the years of the contract completely voidable. So in effect, they could move on from him after this season or the following season if A.J. Dillon outperforms. Let's not forget, too, that we know there's a really short shelf life in this position. Not taking anything away from Aaron Jones, he's had the most touchdowns out of anybody over the last couple of seasons, and he's certainly been one of the most efficient backs. But in terms of standalone value, I think I would take A.J. Dillon as early as the sixth round in 12-team formats. I think very, very highly of A.J. Dillon.
Okay, but you would consider that, but would you do that? Wouldn't you wait a couple more rounds, fill up your roster just to make sure, like, this is not just handcuffing Aaron Jones at this stage. You're saying this is a highly valued guy.
I personally feel he does have standalone value depending on the format. The only reason why I say it, sixth round, and again, might be an egregious take. You can leave your comments below in the video if you want, but I just think very highly of the player, and I think very highly of the position of running backs, and I just think you can't have enough of them. Again, personal theory and opinion on things, but this is why we have discussions. So I just think I think in terms of the Packers backfield situation, it's going to be something that's going to be really interesting week to week in terms of how they're deployed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I appreciate that, and you're right. A.J. Dillon is a beast of a player. He's a big guy. We've seen him produce great in the playoffs last year in the snow. That was just beautiful. The quad father, those shots of his quadriceps is insane. This guy is he's a man. He's 40. No, and he's not even 40. He's in his 20s. So let's move on to the Cleveland Browns, who I'm big fans of both of these guys. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt was the number one back in Kansas City before all the awkwardness happened and was released by the team. So Nick Chubb, super stud. We know that. Incredible player. They added Hunt. Where do you think that if you have Chubb, that you need Kareem Hunt on your team?
Well, it's funny. Last year, we actually had a manager that took both. And he took Nick Chubb second round, and he got Kareem Hunt in the fifth or sixth round. And he actually had both. And then when Nick Chubb got hurt, Kareem Hunt was vaulted into the starter role. But he didn't perform like the RB1 that we've historically seen, and which I found to be extremely interesting. That manager actually traded Hunt away and kept Chubb when Chubb came back healthy, and he was a dynamic player. And Hunt actually saw his production stay stable when Chubb returned. I think this season's a little more interesting. Nick Chubb does have a bit of an injury history going back to Georgia, so I think it is definitely worth rostering having Kareem Hunt, who I also think has standalone value because of his receiving upside. But to say that Kareem Hunt may be an RB1 if Nick Chubb is there or vice versa, I don't know. I'm a little more – I'm not as comfortable to say that both these guys would be vaulted into complete RB1 roles if the other one isn't healthy. I think as a whole, as a unit, they are a great tandem. It's kind of like thunder and lightning. And we've seen great backfield tandems in the NFL do extremely well. I mean, we're seeing Kareem Hunt go in the, 5th, 6th round in terms of as a flex player. If you can get him later, I mean, bonus, it's gravy. We know they're both extremely talented. Hunt's locked up for 2 more seasons, and Chubb's locked up for 3 more now. So the Browns are making a heavy investment in both these guys. But I think they're definitely worth rostering as a whole. Kareem Hunt is probably 1, if not number 2, in terms of, handcuff, in terms of the pecking order, in terms of handcuff value rankings. He was extremely effectual player in Kansas City. So I see no issues making investments in either player.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm high on both of these players. I love them. I love watching them. I'm hoping to get some of them, either 1 or 2 of them, on my roster. Okay, let's move to Jacksonville. I find this one the most interesting. James Robinson was the pickup in waivers or late round drafts of last year that helped people vault their teams to be contenders. This is where people didn't see this coming, and undrafted, I believe. And now they drafted another running back, and it's complicated. It's murky here. So let's talk. Stu, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I don't know as much about this running back that they've drafted. So please give us some insight on this guy.
Well, Travis Etienne was a flat-out college star for Dabo Swinney at Clemson. He was a primary feature back, both with Trevor Lawrence and with Deshaun Watson in his final season as well as a freshman. So Etienne has definitely seen, a yeoman's career in terms of utilization in the NCAA. Now, there are 2 things with this situation I'm monitoring. Travis Etienne has a lot of miles on him in college. Now, I get college is in the NFL, but it's a new coach, an Urban Meyer college coach. It's a radically different offense with Darrell Bevell at the helm, who does like bell cow running backs, as we've seen in Seattle, Minnesota, and in Detroit. And here we have James Robinson, who was undrafted out of Indiana State, just completely blow the socks off, and was really the offense for a 1-15 Jacksonville team led by my favorite quarterback, Uncle Rico. There's 2 factors I'd say that really make me cautious and apprehensive in making a significant fantasy investment in both players. One is deployment and utilization. We've heard Travis Etienne is going to be used more out of the slot and as a receiver. His preseason games, he had 13 snaps, 10 of which were in the backfield, 3 at wide receiver, and none in the slot. And if you think that's bad, go watch Tim Tebow trying to block on those snaps. It was just entertaining. If he makes the roster, well, that's a whole nother story. But if he makes the roster, anyways. So with Travis Etienne, I do think he is a very talented player, and I do think with the fact that he went to the same school as Trevor Lawrence, they want to do some of the same stuff on offense there. Where I think it's a little dangerous is in terms of deployment, utilization, and the fact that like James Robinson may actually be an overall better talented player that is just trapped in a terrible system. We've seen college coaches come to the NFL and try and take their guys from college and turn them into players. I mean, Steve Spurrier tried to do that in the 90s with the Washington football team with Danny Werfel and Jacques Green, and it didn't work out so well. I wouldn't make more than a 7th or 8th round pick at the very most investment in either of these players. But here's the thing. If you do make that investment, you might be able to get 3rd or 4th round value out of them, depending on how either performs. I think it's really going to take an injury for this backfield situation to really reveal itself. But I'm watching with great interest.
Okay, so here's my question with this. Etienne and Robinson, who's the starter? Like, this one seems like a split backfield. It's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be 50-50. It might be 60-40. Which one would you draft first?
I mean, I think James Robinson will start here. I think they're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He finished the job last season. He's certainly – undrafted players love to have chips on their shoulders. When I think of undrafted players, I think of guys like Wayne Corbett and Doug Baldwin. I'll get their receivers, not running backs, but both of their teams brought in immense talented players to compete against them. Keyshawn Johnson in New York versus Wayne Corbett. Wayne Corbett absolutely blew the socks off him. Went to Hofstra, which doesn't even have a football program anymore. And Doug Baldwin was undrafted out of Stanford, actually had to make his way on special teams. And they cut TJ Houshmandzadeh in 2010 because Doug Baldwin beat him out. So,
wow.
like, undrafted players, I think they just bring it because they know this is it for me. I'm playing for a contract extension. I'm playing for my family, whatever it may be. I'm playing for all 31 teams that passed over on me, and I'm making them know who I am. I think if you ask me, I think Travis Etienne might have more skills to offer at the position, but I think James Robinson is going to make it really hard for him to be the starter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely murky. I loved your take on that. Thanks for your help on that. Okay, now let's move over to Baltimore. You've got Dobbins and Gus, and lots of people are talking about that Gus is going to steal all the goal line carries. Plus, you have Lamar Jackson there. This is a complicated one. Lots of hype on Dobbins this year. So let's dive into this handcuff. If you draft Dobbins, are you drafting Gus?
If I'm drafting Dobbins, it's a lot later than a second-round ADP. And if I'm drafting Gus Edwards, it's probably a little earlier than his ADP in the later rounds. And the reason why I say that is this. Not only do you have a TD vulture in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, Greg Roman has been a good offensive coordinator in the NFL, but I think we have seen the product on that offense be very vanilla. And dynamic offensive teams in the NFL know how to diversify as a whole. Now, I'm not saying the Ravens do not have the talent at receiver to make the passing game interesting so that this backfield can produce more. They have a great young receiver in Rashad Bateman, but he's undergone groin surgery, so he might be out for the first few weeks. But further to that, Gus Edwards has a role on this offense. They signed him to an extension. Again, he doesn't catch the football a lot, but he's a hard nose between the tackles, smash mouth kind of running back. He kind of reminds me a bit of like Thomas Jones, if you remember him, the great Jets back. You know, and maybe, and this might be a bit of a stretch, but maybe like Travis Henry, if you remember who he was, Bills and Broncos. Like he's going to be a thorn in the side. Where I'm fading Dobbins a little bit is a lot of people think the passing game upside will go well. And I'm not disputing the player as an athlete. I think he's a fantastic athlete. But Lamar, I think teams key in on him like throwing to the running backs, and there's going to be a lot of defenders in the flat. And I think they're going to force Lamar to, try and run and play QB spy with him or try and beat him down deep. And it's going to be guys like Hollywood Brown and Miles Boykin that have to step up for this team to create at least some balance in terms of, a running attack. I think Dobbins will definitely be the workhorse without Mark Ingram there for sure. But I think he could lose a lot of goal line carries to Gus Edwards. And I think he's going to lose some TDs to Lamar Jackson as a whole. So it's kind of a, a little buyer beware situation. But Dobbins goes down. Gus Edwards is great fantasy value, even if he's not catching passes, at least in standard formats. He's great fantasy value just because he can create some element of goal line work. Plus, he stayed relatively healthy in his career.
Right. Yeah, and 2 years ago, Lamar Jackson was the number one fantasy option, and so he could turn it on. He's got his own jet. So as a quarterback, that's concerning. But anyways, it's good take. Okay, last one for our handcuffs today is in Dallas. Lots of controversy.
But okay.
Pardon me?
I got another backfield tandem we'll get to a little bit after.
Okay. Well, we'll have to go quickly because I don't want this video to be 4 hours. So, Elliott, Zeke Elliott, he wants to be fed. He wants the ball, but there's a super talented back behind him in Pollard. I know that in your league, especially, the value of Pollard is insane, and what people give up for him is craziness. And when Zeke went down, Pollard looked really good. So I'd love to hear your take on this.
Well, Pollard actually won a semifinals for the manager. I played in the finals this past year because I told him go play him, and he beat my rival, and it was just fantastic. More on that later. But Tony Pollard, I think, is a fantastic back. It's funny. University of Memphis has had a lot of athlete players come in. They'd never played running back before, or they've been a receiver before, and then they played running back, and they look like absolute studs. Darrell Henderson, Antonio Gibson come to mind. Pollard is one of those guys. Kenneth Gainwell in Philadelphia is also one of those guys. I think with Pollard, what makes him attractive is that he can do a lot with the football when it's in his hands. Now, I think the offense as a whole is going to run through Dak Prescott, and we know this because when Dak's there, Cowboys, sky's the limit, and we're like, how about them Cowboys, which we would never say as Packer and Raiders fans, but we say it on our fantasy squads all the time. With Zeke, he looks lean. He looks mean. Hard Knocks is certainly going to portray that. Hard Knocks is going to have a lot of influence on Dallas Cowboys players at the drafts. But I think he's really motivated because he had a terrible season last year. And I think with Prescott hopefully returning here, knock on wood, Zeke could have an excellent bounce back season. I don't necessarily feel, though, Pollard is going to eat enough into Zeke's work to make him an RB1. The only way I think Pollard becomes an RB1 is if Zeke falls off a cliff, which has happened before in this position. And if Pollard just absolutely blows the socks up, especially in the red zone. But Kellen Moore is a creative offensive guy. I give him tons of credit. The Cowboys skill players are very cool players to have. I'm going to watch this one with great interest. That's for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So if I have Zeke, I'm trying to get Pollard. I don't know what round I'm going to get him in, but I'm going to take him at least a round or two higher just because of having the safety because of injury there. Okay, well, let's talk about that mystery tandem that I haven't mentioned.
Well, I'm really surprised because as a Raiders fan, I take this very personally, but we got to talk about Josh Jacobs and Kenyan Drake. And the reason why I say that is that both of these guys have played at RB1 levels. Jacobs last year, maybe not the most consistent, very touchdown dependent, but they bring in Kenyan Drake now. And this Raiders team has really demonstrated a commitment to run the football, revamped offensive line. They're going to have some young receivers hopefully step up to give some balance. Derek Carr's been very consistent over the last 2 seasons, very underrated quarterback in the NFL. And a lot of people have written off the Raiders as fantasy values as a whole, unless your name is Darren Waller. So I had to get in Jacobs and Drake.
It's good.
Going in the 4th round, and he could be like he was pegged to be a first rounder last year. And Kenyan Drake, same thing, 2nd round players. Like both of these guys are extremely talented. And you know what? I think the Raiders personally like it that way because they don't really want anybody to know what they're up to. But this is a backfield tandem I'm following very closely, and it could just rock board. So if you're at a turn spot and you're looking to get a flex player or somebody that's at low end RB2 and Jacobs or Drake is there, rounds 3, 4 for Jacobs, 8, 9, 10 for Drake, make the pick, man. I mean, my goodness.
No, that's great. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a real one that nobody's talking about. It's flying under the radar. Listen, this is why you're watching this channel, people, because we're giving you advice that people aren't talking about. This is important stuff, not only handcuffs, but some of these things that are flying under the radar to help you compete and help you battle those weekly head-to-head matchups you have. We want you to contend. We want you to win a championship. And unless you're in my league, then I don't want you to do that. But anyways, thank you so much, Stu, for being here. I just want to remind everyone that we are doing a subscribers league. So if you want to be a part of that subscribers league, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel and put in the comments, I'm interested, and I'll be contacting all those that are eligible to be in it, and I'm pumped about it. So I'm pumped about all that fantasy football. We have so many videos coming up that I can't wait to show you. So this is one of them. And thanks so much for coming. Also, like, comment, subscribe. Always a pleasure to have you, Stu. Thanks so much for coming out.
My pleasure. Go win a title, boys.